All right, so calling the meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. Welcome, everybody. I need to say that this meeting is being recorded, that all votes will be taken by a roll call vote, and I will go around and check that everyone on the committee and the agenda is present and can hear me. So starting Lori, we've already been chatting. Hello,
Yes.
good to see you. Danielle. Oh, Danielle, did you freeze? You might have frozen. Hold on, I'm gonna come back to you. Katie,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
and I see you, Greg, as well. Hopefully, Danielle, you'll come back in a minute. Just start talking when you do, because you look frozen on this end. No worries, though. Okay. So the agenda, that's not the right one. This is the right one. Okay. So first on our agenda is discussion and voting for a reserve fund transfer. There you go, Danielle.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, I froze.
Oh, no problem. All right. So we received, I'm going to pull it up here. Let me share my screen. And we have Lori and Greg here to answer questions. Oh, good evening, Ken. Did I just see you pop on? When you're on, say hello.
Hey there.
Good to see you. So this is the reserve fund transfer you've all been given for this evening. This is in the amount of $9,870. It is for an air conditioning failure at Town Hall. Present in the account currently $3,780.77. This is the estimate. Greg, this has not yet been done, correct?
No.
Oh, no, sorry, date
No.
completed. Oh, that's the estimate, not the work.
Yeah, no, we have not
Yeah.
done it yet.
Okay.
Believe me, windows are
feeling it.
open, fans are on,
So there's no air conditioning at all?
not on the second
Oh,
floor.
it was hot today.
Oh, very sorry for your staff.
Well, we don't have the money, so
Yep,
that's
gotcha.
it.
And is this the kind of thing that went out to multiple bids, or is this small enough it didn't have to? Just remind me.
The latter, good question. So the threshold is $10,000. You just have to follow sound business practices.
Okay,
From 10,000 to 50,000 is call 3 quotes. So we didn't even have to do that. But so
Okay.
as I got my quick little handwritten note on the first page is that
Mhm.
we've contracted with Martel before. That was
gonna be my next question, but I thought that, yeah.
Yeah, they're our go-to vendor
Okay.
for this. And it seems like it's not too complicated. Not that I'm like a technician of any sort, but just in my understanding is they have to change out that compressor.
Yeah, okay. That's just something that happens to AC units, right?
Sure.
Okay. Any questions from the committee on this RFT? Okay, then I will, oh, go ahead, Peter.
Sorry. Not so much on this RFT, but it's June 15th or 13th, I guess. Do we know, is there anything else out there as a possibility to draw from a reserve?
Yes.
Go ahead, Alana.
So I was contacted this week by the school department, and they have some requests for reserve fund that they are working on to send our way. Currently, we have $147-ish thousand in the account. So this plus what the school is looking for, I don't think is going to deplete it. Is there anything else, Greg, that you know?
No, it's a good question. So Lori and I have been talking about end of year transfers. And we think we can cover whatever else sort of like, but this is sort of a unforeseen, of course. This is this is sort of like a instant, something we need immediate. But otherwise, we believe, and just to kind of like to spoil it a little for you guys, Maya, who's our health insurance provider, they gave a month premium. So that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, which will cover us for a lot of our budget transfers, like snow and ice was higher than even what we projected going into free cash for town meeting, like so. But we'll get into that later. But right now, we're good on the town side. It'll be up to the finance committee to consider school requests.
And I'm sorry, when you say Maya gave, you saying they gave us a rebate of 1 month's
Yeah.
premium? Because
They call it a holiday, so we didn't have to pay that month.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Any other questions? All right, then I will entertain a motion.
I'd move to approve the reserve fund transfer of $9,870 for the air conditioning.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? And I will do a roll call vote. Katie,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. All right. Moving on in our agenda. So I put a discussion item here for OPEB obligation and the FY21 audit report and asked Lori and Greg to be here for it. I don't have any specific, I guess, resolution for anything in mind for this. I just thought that we had talked briefly about the amounts of the OPEB obligation, and when you go through the audit report, there's a lot of talk of it as well. So I thought they tied in together pretty well. And asking Lori and Greg to be here, they could help us with any questions we had with both of them. So I have the audit report. Should we want to pull up anything specific? Go ahead, Peter.
Sorry, Alana.
No.
I guess you're probably you know this too, but Elliot was the one particularly interested in the OPEB thing.
Yeah.
And
I know,
I'm
it's
just noting
and
he's
he-
not here.
I
don't
know
if
he
you
didn't.
heard from him or.
I have not heard from him actually. So I'm guessing that something came up, but that is a little unfortunate. I think we'll go ahead and, this isn't going to be the last. Yeah, like I said, nothing's getting resolved tonight.
The rest of us
and
will have more basis to talk about it.
there
I
we
guess.
go. Yep, and
Presumably
we're
we can
recording this.
communicate some of this.
Right, and he can go watch the recording as well. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, that's okay. Yep.
but you
All right,
are
thanks.
correct. Yep, absolutely. Okay. So I was saying to Lori before we started that I'm not going to claim to have thoroughly combed through this audit report and understood it all, not even a little bit. However, in going through it, I did have a couple of questions that came up, and I was hoping to maybe talk about them. So my first was the property. They say that the property taxes are approximately 61% of our total revenue. And I don't have a real sense of whether or not that is a sort of normal type percentage for a town. Are we high on that? Are we low on that? Is that something that is in any way concerning? So maybe Greg, if you know at all.
Actually, Lori I'll tell you
Oh,
my perspective, but Lori
Sure.
actually she's worked in more towns than I have.
Okay.
But I will say normal is relative. So we happen to be surrounded by towns that are more reliant on residential than commercial property taxes. So we happen to have the old mill, we happen to have a couple of industrial sites, commercial sites, we have a downtown, and revenue comes from more than, of course, taxes. I mean, property taxes. Like, it comes from sales tax, excise taxes. We get state funds, grants, etc. And then other sort of forms of cash. You know, like we get other sort of receipts. But we, like most, like almost any town I can think of, is very reliant, of course, on property taxes. And whereas we have most of our property taxes through residential, not entirely. But when I think of something like Stowe is very reliant on their property. Or I live in Acton. Here, I'm joining you from Acton. Acton has very little commercial. They've been trying for years to get more commercial, and they celebrate anytime they get a turnover of any sort of commercial site to get more. Whereas Maynard, especially with the Market Basket and the Maynard Crossing development, that's a huge addition to our commercial tax base. And you'll hear every year that the Board of Assessors tries to advocate for a balance and maybe a consideration of a change in balance between our commercial and residential tax base and our collection between those two. But that's for them to argue. But from my perspective, I think it's about normal. It's not necessarily something to be concerned about. But I will say that in regards to revenue and maybe expectations going forward, we had a couple really good years of growth, which then related to free cash from the Maynard Crossing development. But now that is, I mean, there's a couple more pad sites that have yet to be developed, but like, we've seen the great majority of revenue that's going to come from that development. And we're going to see some development, like infill development, like you saw Gruber Building taken down. You'll see development around Excelsior Comics, like on Powder Mill and Waltham. You'll see that, and it'll be kind of like that. It'll be like little pockets of development, and then housing market and whatnot, fluctuations, and turnover of housing. But so I hope that'll be like a certain amount of like consistent trend of growth, like maybe 300,000-400,000 year range, the dollar range every year. But it's not going to be like we had $2 million of free cash one year. Like, it's not going to be like that. But that's my perspective. So Lori, what do you think about taxes?
I think too, when you're looking at the reports, like Elena, we were discussing when I first came on, is when it's talking about revenues in governmental activities, that's not just the general fund. That's across, you know what I mean? So I'm not sure which page you're referring to where it talks about that, but keep in mind that a lot of these statements are referring to governmental activities or governmental funds, which includes the stabilization fund, special revenues, capital projects, all of that included. It's not just the general fund that we know as the general fund.
And just to highlight, or can you clarify, Lori, it includes water and sewer also?
No, under governmental activities,
not.
no, they would be considered under business-like activities.
Business-like, yeah, that's what they call that.
Or
Okay.
proprietary funds is what they're called in other statements as well. So no, they would not be included in that.
Speaking of free cash, I just wanted to show something real quick because I was looking back because free cash was discussed quite a bit at ATM, and there was a statement that we were, I don't know, flush with their embarrassment of free cash this year. And I just wanted to take a quick look back to say, that's not actually, this, like you're saying, Greg, and I know that we shouldn't bank on, and I know, we certainly want to be sure that we are budgeting properly and not getting, I'm not saying this is the best practice, some of these numbers, but just for a historical perspective, this year was not, strictly speaking, out of the ordinary if you look at these numbers. So just for those that may not have that historical perspective, wanted to put that out there. Okay. Okay. So the page, all right, on page 43, I can open this up so that we can actually look at what I'm talking about. It said that the retirement had to be fully funded by 2040. is that the OPEB obligation?
No, that is our pension obligation
Okay.
only, and we're projected to be funded by 2036. We're scheduled to be, not projected, we're scheduled to be funded by 2036.
Sorry, I'm skipping ahead just to.
There is
so you
no
know.
requirement to fund OPEB at this time.
Okay, great.
So
Because
we've been,
I got a little, here it is, it's right down here.
Yep.
Retirement system required to be fully funded, and we are projecting to fund that by 2036.
36.
Okay, excellent.
do you see how the town contributed 2.5 in
Mhm.
FY21? So the town's been making, but we have a retirement board and they provide and they give us assessments. So like it's pretty regulated on that end locally, as opposed to OPEB, which is not. So we've been
Okay.
contributing only. I know I'm kind of dipping into the next topic, but
Nope,
Like-
they're kind of related. They're gonna go back and forth. Don't worry about it.
yeah. So there's a difference between OPEB and pension. And OPEB is like health insurance is a common way to think of it is health insurance for retirees. Whereas pension is like the, pension, it's like the monthly payments.
Okay. I don't remember what page this was on, but it said that, and this was just something that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention again, because I'm sure we've talked about it before, but the MSBA reimbursements for Fowler are ending this coming fiscal, right? The
Yeah.
FY
23
23,
will
and
be our
that's
last year.
$898,000.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, so
So
just
that's-
wanted that to be like a known
It's
situation.
revenue, but it's paying off. Like
Mhm.
it's not. I don't consider that as like, operational revenue, so to speak. It's
Right, because it goes right back to the debt service for that.
It's
school?
used, yeah, it offsets
Okay.
the debt, it's the debt service payment.
And the
that
debt
payment will be
service
paid
goes
off
away
then?
at the same time the revenue does.
Okay,
Yes.
Yeah, so it's.
Okay,
kind
so
of a net
It's a
zero
wash.
so
effect.
does that mean Fowler School will be paid off in 2023 as well?
Mhm.
Okay, thank
Or
you.
that loan will.
yeah, that's true. So for
Sometimes there's multiple loans per school, depending on how long it took to
Okay.
construct it. They go up to bond multiple times
that's true.
over the course of however many years it takes to construct the school.
Okay. Sorry for my scroll. I'm looking for page 11. Okay. I just thought this was interesting, point of knowledge as well, that the town typically taxes at or near its levy limit. Excess limit capacity for 2022 tax recap process was approximately 134,000. We've talked a little bit about levy limits versus levy ceilings. It gets a little confusing, but is that number in any way concerning, or that's where it should, you should be sort of close to your limit, but not close to your ceiling? Am I understanding that?
Typically, towns tax close to their levy limit, not their ceiling.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
And no, it's not concerning, but it is something
Right.
we've been, not to say we're not concerned, but like it is something that we are cognizant. And by we, I may also mean our board of assessors, and particularly our chief assessor, brings that up every year at the tax recap hearing with the select board. It's just where we are. And
Okay.
and it is something to consider when we're looking at the budget development and future costs and growth within departments. And it's all relative.
So Greg, that would become more of a concern if we were doing something like Prop 2.5 override, correct?
Yep.
Does
Yep.
that go against this levy limit, or that rate has to do with the ceiling though?
That
The ceiling.
increases your limit, which now creeps towards your ceiling.
Okay, right, okay.
Mhm.
And
So
then
just to be clear, if you did a Prop 2.5 override, that would allow you to go beyond the levy limit, but you still can't go beyond the levy ceiling.
That's correct.
right,
The only way you're allowed to do that when you're doing like, you're funding a school or something like that, but not an operational override. So the only reason why I bring that up is that's not without concern. So, ultimately, if your expenses are going up, and this is again, sort of the ridiculousness of the whole way that it gets done, in the sense that, there is a 2.5% limit, whereas if we weren't, if you had a lot of growth opportunities, then you would be able to bump up your tax ceiling.
Right.
We don't have a lot. And oh, by the way, Acton has plenty of commercial areas, not only including West Acton, but I would point out Route 2A is not a insignificant source of revenue. Sudbury also has it with, Route 20, and, Concord also has several business districts that I'm sure bring in quite a bit. We unfortunately have, limited opportunities for this. We have 129 Parker, Maynard Crossing, which is in, and then, the mill, which obviously has opportunities, but then Powder Mill Road. So, we're in a bit of a catch-22 in the sense that, we've recognized that in order to build out Powder Mill Road, we've got to do things around infrastructure, not least of which is, water and sewer and so forth. And of course, you have to, fund that proactively. You can fund a bit of that through the development process, but not the entire thing. But my point is that ceiling does become, an operative, a constraint when you're looking at being able to increase your revenues 2.5% plus growth, which is pretty minor for Maynard. When in fact inflation, eats into that and more. And so, this coming year is likely to be a significant. We've already seen what it's doing to the schools. So again, I just throw that out there, that limit, doesn't, that's not a big issue if you're not doing a Prop 2.5 override. But, I would throw out there that I think, eventually we're going to have to start doing that if we want to fund municipal services the way we should.
Yeah, I think inflation is an important topic, as well as we've seen, certainly with the DPW department, with building supplies, with anything costing quite a bit more than we thought it would if we, even wait a month or two from estimate to implementation. So that is probably going to continue to be a bit of a problem with capital and whatnot expenses moving forward. Okay, so this number here, the 57,000 million plus, this is our OPEB obligation. Is that
Yes, that's the net OPEB obligation.
okay? So that's what we're looking at when we're talking about the what we have, and this is what we
That
have
is
saved.
ultimate. Go back down a second. Can you go back down, Alana, a little bit? No, the other way, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
My bad.
Go back up.
My bad. Is that just pension and, yeah, trust fund? Yes, so that is just OPEB.
Okay. Because there's a lot of numbers in here. I just want to make sure I knew which ones I was,
Fixed income.
which ones were which.
Actually, that's pension. That's Maynard's pension fund, retirement account,
Oh, okay.
pension and other employee benefits trust fund. So that's actually the Maynard trust fund with the OPEB trust in it, I believe, added to it. Because we have 1.7 million put aside for OPEB
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
But our liability is 58.7 million, and 1.7 million we have funded.
Okay. And when we say we have funded, like, is that is that starting to get withdrawn on at
No.
all yet, or no?
No, not
This
at
is-
all.
This is
It's
future.
put aside.
Put aside,
Right,
okay.
it's being put aside and not touched.
And at what, do we have a year at which it will start to get touched?
We haven't discussed that yet.
Okay,
We're just trying to put aside money for now and pay as we go the
Okay.
obligations.
And
okay.
are these put aside in like an investment type account, or are they put aside in like a savings account with a fixed rate?
It's set aside in a trust fund, and there's certain requirements as to how it can be invested. There's a law surrounding OPEB trust funds and how they must be invested and held.
They actually do talk about that, I'm pretty sure. And they say like the rate, like which ones we have them in. I think they're very much, at least the majority of it is state run.
Mm.
Because like even bonds aren't doing great right now, so I just want to make sure the number's not going down.
Okay. I don't think I had any other particularly specific questions. I guess I would say, was there anything, Greg or Lori, in this audit report that gave you pause or no? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, before we go on, can
Yeah.
we go back and look at that thing you were looking at for 1 second? And I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I
No,
was looking at my copy of it and it took me a minute to find it.
that's fine. Tell me a
Um,
page. What do you want to look at?
This same thing, this
Okay.
pension and other employee benefit things. So I'm sorry, Lori, and not to be too rudimentary. So this is pension and OPEB combined, and maybe some other small thing.
It looks like it's, yeah, it looks like it's the Maynard Retirement Fund, which is not on my balance sheet. And the town's balance sheet, that's held separately by the Maynard Retirement Fund, whatever you call it, retirement board. But the post-employment benefits is held by the town. So this looks to be a combined balance sheet between the two, showing our
Okay,
like our obligations.
So well, it doesn't show
No,
obligations. It
obligations, sorry,
shows
what we
holdings.
have.
I'm sorry, what did you say? What
What we have.
hold,
Yes.
Pensions.
what we have. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this doesn't show anything about the OPEB liability we keep talking about.
No, I mean, they talk about the total OPEB liability. We have a separate actuarial study that is done for the town that gets in depth. That describes, the liability and all the factors that are used to calculate that.
So Alana, were you going to ask more about the OPEB liability? Or-
Um,
I'm sorry, I haven't
Mhm.
looked through this yet, so
Yeah.
but
No, that's
is
fine.
there someplace in here where the auditors disclose it? Is there a note or something?
I do believe that they talk about the OPEB liability, but I didn't mark the page. I do remember reading about it.
Mhm.
But to me, I feel like I remembered it being less than what I thought. But I think I might have been getting confused with that 57 million that's put aside for pensions and not like the liability.
Yeah, the total OPEB liability is 58.7 million.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Nope, that was
We
what
have 1.7 million put aside in that trust fund for a net liability of 57 million as of our last actuarial study.
And
Okay.
Alana, in this on page 37, it shows both the net OPEB liability and the net pension liability.
Thank you for that
Yeah,
page.
the net
number.
pension liability is roughly 11.3 million.
Okay, here we go.
Lori or Greg, either one. Do we have
There it
employees
is.
who are still actively accruing service on both the pension and the OPEB?
We're always accruing service.
So I know that like I'm not familiar with like the government side of things. I know a lot of private companies are going more toward like 401ks and plans like that and moving away from pensions. But I assume that for town governments, it's probably everyone's still in the pensions and they're
Right.
still
Yes.
eligible for OPEB.
Right. Right, we haven't private, no, there's no been like similar sort of 401k privatization of it. It's
Okay.
there's the Maynard Retirement Board that feeds into the greater, I can't remember the PARAC, which is there's an acronym for something like the Greater Regional System of Retirement. But it's kind of one of the perks of working for government is it's kind of like a known traditional sense. You just
Right.
do that.
And on OPEB, are we, Laura, you mentioned we're paying as we go. So we're paying for the retiree health premiums as they come in like on an annual basis. It looks like we're.
Right, it comes out of our regular operating budget, regular Maya bills. We're paying the retirees. They pay in a portion of it, and the town pays a portion of their health insurance.
Okay, so that like 55 million or so is basically like future benefits for
Yes.
people. Like
Yes, that
estimated
obligation is
for-
future benefits as calculated by how many people are employed now, how many people are retired.
Yeah, because I think it sounds like a massive number, but when you think
Yes.
about like current employees are eligible for that, some of them may retire like 40 years from now and then have a life expectancy of like 30 to 40 years after that.
Mhm.
That's a liability covering many decades.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that helps it put it in
But
context more.
But I assume that liability is discounted to a present value. It's not like it's,
But there's also assumptions for medical and premium increases over time too.
Yes, there is. Yes.
the liability for current employees, are we fully funding that though? Am I mistaken about that? Isn't, so for current employees and their future health insurance, I had some idea we were funding that now, and that wasn't adding to the OPEB liability. Am I mistaken?
Yeah, no, not that I know of. The only funds we're putting aside for future payments is that money we're putting into the trust fund yearly.
But the pension we're fully funding as we go.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Why does the OPEB liability decrease then?
It has, I think it has to do with the assumptions that are used. They've changed some of the assumptions, I said, as to how long people will be employed, how long they live afterwards, medical coverage costs, interest rates, all those different assumptions. I can send you guys the actuarial study that was done, and it'll explain the assumptions that are used.
I'd appreciate that. I probably won't understand half of it, but I'll read it. It was like the one section on the CPA exam where I was like, I'm never going to use that.
Little did you know.
I know. I was responsible for the pension at my job up until last year.
Well, then you're one of the few that probably understands these financial statements.
I understand some of it, but government accounting is so different. So I interned for a town accountant for a year, but
Mhm.
I've been trying to like remember way back and I don't remember it.
But these statements aren't even close to what I have to produce for the DOR.
Oh, I
We
bet.
use UMass here in Mass, and it's a completely different structure.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of it, I get it once I dig into it, but a lot of the phrases and the way it's broken down is totally different from what I'm used to.
Mhm.
All right. So does anybody else have any other specific questions from the audit report? And don't worry if you have not like fully studied this. I just wanted to touch on it and, seem like something we should take a look at. So again, Greg and Lori, with the audit report, was there anything in there that you found to be, concerning or a surprise or anything that you think we should make sure we are aware of?
No.
No, but thank you for asking, and I would have told the select board, because I don't like surprises, as you know. So, no, and the auditor, Terenzio is his first name. I'm actually drawing a blank on his last name, but we've been using,
his last name.
it's something very Italian. So
Yes.
we've been using Roselli Clark and that's the CPAs for the we is in the town a number of years, so well before I got here, and so we have a good working relationship, and I think they understand our books and how we've been doing process, and they've been encouraging us to make sure that we abide by accepted and advised financial processes and policies and whatnot. And we've been trying to do that as best we can. And they point out that we're in a very similar position. I'm trying to kind of paraphrase what he said to the select board. We are in a very similar position to many towns. Like when OPEB is a good example. We contribute what we can based on the availability of free cash and the demands we have otherwise, which is usually capital and snow and ice and everything else we got to pay for. So right, I think there was nothing he pointed out. There was no what's sometimes called a management letter, meaning like a specific, excuse me, a specific finding. So that was good. I remember like either a couple of years ago, it wasn't a management letter. There was like, it's like the lesser form. It was like an advisory, and it was just saying, make sure you do cybersecurity. So sometimes they'll make sure they just sort of like give advisories to sort of like the financial good, and right. So, and speaking of that, we do cybersecurity training, which I'm sure all the employees love when I remind them to do it. But it's good to kind of stay on that and stay on your server protection and your firewalls, et cetera, like any other sort of organization, modern business practice. And that's what the auditors need to hear, which then they put it into the, if or otherwise, they mark that in the report. And that we try to be like a good solid financial standing, because our creditors will read those statements, and then we get sort of, marked, and our credit rating gets reflected. So far so good. I mean, it is a lot. It's like 60 something pages.
It is, yeah.
To go through. And I admit I don't read word for word every page, but my eyeballs can kind of know where I need to go look at. Plus I have the privilege of sitting with the auditor, and he kind of translates for me.
Right.
And I think we're doing well. I think what's the unknown is what's the scary part, and we're going to handle it as we come. The town has pretty good economic standing, so we can handle most of the bumps that come across us, like a pandemic, and we kind of know what big things are coming down the path, which is what the auditor is more concerned about hearing from us. And then when I'm on calls with the creditors, they need to hear from us. Do we have stabilization? Do we have reserves? Are we prepared to handle sort of like market adjustments, budget adjustments? Are we considering more capital investments? Because that's what they need to hear too, that we're actually investing into the town, the progress and the prosperity of the town, which we very much are. If there's going to be a new fire station and then a turnover of that current property of the fire station, and then that's what they kind of need to hear, that like we're good stewards of the financial. So I think we are, but I'm a little higher level. If you want to talk like more numbers, you can look at Lori. I'm the I'm the cheerleader. So
Okay.
I don't know, Lori, what's your understanding?
No, as Trenzio noted, he actually noted, one of the statements he noted in the report was that our total net position increased by approximately $2.5 million. And this was due to the strong revenue growth and continued diligence in cost management, that we were looking good. We fared very well through COVID. We were diligent in reducing our revenue estimates. Some towns were not so diligent and ended up in a revenue deficit. We still ended up bringing in, compared the same amount of revenue that we had originally budgeted for, which, contributed to our free cash, but nobody had a crystal ball and knew how COVID was going to affect town finances. So we were very diligent in reducing our revenue, reducing our budget to make sure that we could withstand, whatever COVID brought our way, and thankfully that our revenues remained strong.
And took advantage of grants and changed, the select board as a licensing authority was very gracious, generous with extension of premises and outdoor eating. And then coincidentally, we had a market basket open during the pandemic. So that really helped. So there, things and
fell
the
in a nice
introduction,
way.
a new business, like a new industry, that's marijuana. I mean, like the town is pretty welcoming of like prosperity, like things that are going to kind of keep the ball moving. And not to say towns don't like a ball moving, but other towns can be a little bit more like they take more pause along the way, whereas like Maynard's kind of leaning in.
Ken, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I know that, typically an auditor is sort of, looking more towards the past to make sure that the numbers are there. But is he looking at future trends at all?
Yeah, to a degree. So
To a
if you,
degree, to a degree they do. I think more future trends they've looked at, I think with OPEB and pension, you know what I mean? He's looking at the future liability obligations of the town.
Yep.
Versus, I guess, how we budget for things. He wants us, you know, he has mentioned that, you know, conservative budgeting has led to a good financial position for the town, and that we should continue on that path. But he's not doing forecasting or anything for us.
So, you know, I'm just realizing that my light gray shirt is looking green. I'm tapping into my inner Zelensky, I guess. So anyway, although he's got better hair than I do. So, anyway, you know, I guess, you know, asking this, I suppose in you know, in a neutral way, you know, many of us pointed out, you know, Peter was one, I was one, there have been others, both on the committee as well as off the committee, about, you know, school expenses. But, you know, I think we've also been talking a long time about some of the trends that, you know, even going back to Bob McCarthy, that, you know, we were seeing trends that, you know, suggested that revenues would not be keeping up with the costs, and we needed to do something about that. Is this something that we really have to rely on ourselves, you know, as a team, not just, you know, finance committee, but obviously the two of you as well? Is that something we're relying on, you know, ourselves to look at and assess? Or is this something that, you know, he could be taking a look at and saying, you know, yeah, if you take a look at, you know, these trends, you know, this either is something you guys can handle and here's how you can handle it, which would obviously be awfully nice, or yeah, this is actually, you know, a time bomb here that you all need to address. I guess I'm just asking, is this something, you know, that we have to rely on ourselves to sort of assess and come up with options and so forth?
In my experience, I haven't seen auditors do that sort of thing. But not that I've ever had a town that asked me to ask for that either. So, I mean, I guess I could inquire.
Well, so, you know, again, I'm not, you know, I was asking just the question of whether the role of an auditor was just looking back at, you know, backwards. And obviously, you know, there is, I get the fact that there are things around liabilities that certainly he would be looking at. But I guess beyond sort of the, you know, the standard sort of accounting practices, is he looking, you know, forensically, I guess, at, you know, trends and saying, hey, look, you know, I'm seeing, you know, increased, you know, struggles in, you know, certain trends and so forth. Schools are certainly not the only area, but I guess I have my answer. So.
I mean, yeah, they show some things from year over year. They'll show some differences, but typically they're just there to look back and evaluate this, you know, our financial position each year, not to really give us direction to go forward. But they do, I mean, they do supply in the audit some different, like, comparison of year to year, but that's about it.
Okay.
right, I'm reading what's called the engagement letter, which is their proposal. This was just on the last select board meeting last 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. That is kind of like their proposal for the next contract term. And I'm doing a quick scan over it right now, and I'm not seeing anything that's sort of like forecasting. Like, they talk about evaluation, which is mostly reflective, as Lori was pointing out.
Yeah, and mind you, I'm not suggesting that he should forecast.
Yeah.
I mean, part of this, just like you look at liabilities and you say, look, you know, do you have liabilities that are headed in the wrong direction? I'm not looking for him to do the forecast for us, but again, you know, it's not that far away. And it's very similar to sit there and say, hey, look, you know, the trends here suggest that, you know, your revenues may not meet your obligations. So
that'd be a good point. So I would think in particular, it would have to be like a certain obligation that should be defined, so that where pension it is, where it's defined, you have to meet your obligation by 2040. And he points out that because of the investments that we're currently making and the rate that we do and the sort of like expectation and assessment of retirees and whatnot, mortality rates, and like to go into a certain amount of detail, that yes, we will meet that obligation. But it is difficult, as is any forecasting exercise, but certainly the auditors that are a little bit more like they're a little less subjective, like they don't know the town, and we just happen to be one of many towns that they audit, I'm sure if I asked Terenzio personally, like, hey, what do you think, he would tell me, but it probably
Right.
wouldn't be in any official capacity because that's just not what he stamps. But it would be, yeah, I actually feel comfortable in the 3 or 4 years that I've been working with him, that if I saw his advice, he'd probably give me the off the record, which is fair. And it's not to say
Yeah.
we don't seek advice from other. I mean, that's why we went through the exercise with the Collins Center, which we still keep, and Lori and I have discussed it. Like it is really important to us to have all that feedback, to have those different perspectives, similar to Bob McCarthy and what Jillian did as well. Like that, those are good perspectives to keep in mind as we struggle with the day-to-day and week by week air conditioning going out. Like that,
Right.
it's like that balance between both.
The forest and the trees and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is a good point, Ken. And I do agree that sometimes it is hard even for us to have the capacity to do forecasting. And, we did do a real, great effort by Jillian and Bob recently, as was noted. And then we have this Collins Center tool, but that these are complicated things and not necessarily something that this committee has always the capacity to do and move forward. So it would be good to keep that in mind and look for opportunities to find help with that. I'm thinking off the top of my head, maybe the town finance committee, the Massachusetts Association of Town Finance Committees, and maybe they might have some resources that could be of help to us.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Danielle.
So Ken, what you're talking about sounds a lot like when auditors assess going concern for companies. Lori, is there any equivalent to that for towns?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
It's kind of a hard concept to apply to towns, but it's a little bit similar. Like it's not full-blown forecasting, to Ken's point, but it's a little bit of like, is there any like red flags right now that if this trend continues, you guys run out of money, essentially?
I think those are things typically he would say, like I said, not in an official capacity in our audit letter, but those are things that he may mention just while he's in auditing, looking at financial statements. And, we're having multiple conversations over the days that he is there regarding, finances.
I think it would
he has
be
not indicated as such.
He's not, because what he does indicate is that we're doing well. So he's not saying like we're like knocking everything out of the park, because we have realistic sort of like setbacks and challenges. But what he does point out is that, as Lori pointed out, we continue to make progress on our various obligations. I think what he would point out is maybe something that you might hear more Western, like further Western, where the populations are going down. So and then therefore your tax base is going down, your valuations are going down, like people aren't, and then if there's an expectation that services remain, even though population goes down, you're in trouble. So you're just not balancing the books. So we're not there yet. Services are always a challenge to keep up with the population, and the expectations of what service can provide is difficult to maintain as well. But we're so far so good, right? I mean, like we have a good amount of reserves, as you've already exercised this evening, as well as in our enterprise budgets, as was appropriated by the town meeting the other day, that we can handle sort of like some unexpected circumstances, which will certainly come. But we're not, in my opinion, of course, this is also subjective. I'm sure if you ask my department heads, they would say that they're not getting enough, similar to the schools. I think it's a valid point to say that regardless of the population, demand dictates a certain amount of budget. And we've been able to keep up with the demand. I mean, that's subjective, but in my opinion, I think we have. And I think to Ken's point, will we always be able to keep up with the demand with the amount of revenue? Like, is that balance going to always be there? It's really difficult to say. But I really look, and I know Lori does too. Like we're interested in looking as far ahead as we can. Like no one likes surprises. especially non-accountants. So we try to sort of like look ahead, and I need that too as I negotiate contracts, and I kind of and then I like see how much leverage there is. I need to know, like, am I shooting myself in the foot 2 years from now if I make this deal today? Like that's what everyone thinks about. I think about it I promise you, on a daily basis. So it's and then that way when I go to the select board, I can confidently say, like, this is going to be a good deal. We'll be okay. Like, we can take this on. But that's hard to say. But right now, I think we're okay, because as you can see, progress continues. That church was renovated, and it's a beautiful, I don't know who's going to move in, but it's a beautiful like
it
renovation of that
is.
space. And that's an indication to me that, like, there's still progress in Maynard, and we're able to keep up. Population has not exploded in the other direction, right? So we're able to keep up demands. So far so good. So in other words, the auditor hasn't told me that we're in trouble yet. He just says we're doing okay.
Yeah, I was just curious because I mean, on the company side, like there's literally a requirement that they assess our ability to be a going concern in the future.
Wow.
But it sounds like there's no equivalent to that. But then similar to Ken's question, I don't have like the same history, so I'm not super familiar with like Bob McCarthy or anything like that. Do we do any sort of official long range planning?
Not really. So it's been I'll just own it. Like, no. So 4 years ago, the finance committee asked me to look into two things, which is forecasting and financial policies. So and I think that next year I applied for this grant, and we got this like UMass Boston Collins Center, and they helped us out doing both those things. And they've been sitting, like, literally, they actually sit on my desk right now because I look at it every day. But we're not reliant on it to the degree that I would like to be. And that was something that Bob McCarthy tried to, and Jillian, like, took on personally as best they could. And that's really helpful. And then now we have Jeff Swanberg, who's also taken on that initiative. And he's really done a good job of like comparing us to other towns. And we do that exercise, how we do it in other towns, what investments we're making into. I mean, my HR does it all the time to when we compare contracts and costs for personnel. So as much as I would love to say that we have a good 5-year plan, we don't, but I would want to have one. And even then it comes with like a huge grain of salt that like, I don't know, there's a pandemic. So like you can only you do the best you can. And then that has to get updated every year.
You know, I hate to interrupt, but I actually think that, you know, we did have some long-term planning, and Greg and others were involved in long-term planning, and that was definitely pre-COVID. So I actually think he ought to be taking more credit than he is for the fact that there was long-term planning. Now, COVID shot that all to hell, and I think we all, know why that was. One, it created a lot of uncertainty around expenses and revenues, but it also, pulled our attention away from, any sort of long-term planning. But, I actually think that we did do long-term planning. We did have some things in place that we were taking a look at 5-year trends.
Yep.
And even if, the 5-year trends, were to Greg's point, I mean, you're doing some magic forecasting to some extent. We knew year on year what our expenses, were going to be in general terms. I think what I would have liked to have seen, for example, is, a few years ago when Marlboro had reached its limit on the number of kids it could send to AMSA, and they were no longer going to be able to send any kids to AMSA, and yet Clinton and Hudson and Maynard could then, we weren't taking a look at any sort of trends. And that's actually an important trend because, that's a significant amount of money that goes out the door, and for a long period of time, because once you have a kid going, that's 6 years that kid is at AMSA. And then they're pulling in all their siblings and everything like that. And they pull in their friends who start to hear about AMSA and so forth. And so that was a significant, when I started looking at this years ago, when I was like, well, this is going to get over $1 million someday, everybody was like, no, that's not going to happen. Now, I use that to illustrate the fact that there are dynamics that we can predict over the next 5 years, with some degree of certainty. And that's particularly about the big chunks of our revenues and our, our costs. And, even if we don't give the schools everything that they want, we know what the trends are, and we could work with them collaboratively to get that. But I do think we have a framework for doing the long-term planning. And I'm hoping that as, we start to, get to a new normal, we'll take that framework back up. Largely what got, it matches largely what was in the Collins report.
Me too.
But you should take credit for it, Greg, because actually a lot of work, you and your team put a lot of work into that.
All right, thank you.
Before I think we're about ready to wrap up with Greg and Lori, I did find a page I wanted to share.
I saw that too. I didn't want to interrupt your flow, but it actually describes a lot of the questions y'all had about like how it's, I know I'm just taking your thunder right now, Alana.
That's all right.
But it does get into a certain amount of detail, a description of how they came up with these rates and what the investment return is. And yeah, what is it, page 47? Yep.
Yes, 47. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, just for point of reference, is just the plain old numbers of what we're talking about, how many employees. And we did touch on this, retirees contribute 25%. So this was a very informative page about some of what's going on with OPEB. And I just wanted a point of clarification just for myself to know. So when we talk about hiring new employees, that is obviously one of the more expensive things that we do in budgets, right?
Yep.
Adding a new employee is always, and it touches on multiple budgets because it also touches on the benefits budget and
Yep.
yada, yada. But in terms of OPEB, that only really is affected when we have an employee that goes through to their retirement. Am I understanding that correct? So if we have a short-term employee or a contracted employee or something, we know someone is staying for 5 years or whatnot, that's not someone that is then in this sheet, in this like 191 here of enact, correct?
They would consider all employees that would be eligible for the OPEB benefit, for those benefits when they retire. So if somebody was only 19 hours a week and they're not a pensionable, they would not get those benefits. No,
Okay.
that wouldn't be considered into their evaluations. So,
Right,
but
or
even
if
if they look at current employees, when they do their actuarial study, they're looking for retirees, the current retirees and current employees. And that's how they figure, that's how they do their actuarial evaluations.
Okay.
So that's why each time they do one, it can fluctuate a little bit depending on our current employees and what our, obligation will be in the future.
Right. So this is the 58 million is going to fluctuate, not just because we take on new employees, but because the
Employees go
nature of
elsewhere.
right.
It
Okay.
can fluctuate, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is not a hard number that just keeps going up, I guess is my point.
Yeah, it can fluctuate. Yeah. And like I said, different factors come into play, the discount value, values of plans 20 years from now, what I mean?
Yeah.
They look out at all those different assumptions that they make.
Okay.
Yep.
And this percentage, this is how much we have it funded, basically?
Yes.
Is that? Okay.
30%, basically.
Okay. All right. Go team.
For our pensions, 83% funded.
Yeah.
Hey,
Much better number.
see, there you go. That's a much nicer number. It does get confusing though between pensions and OPEB and
It
Yep.
does.
all sorts of stuff. It is a little okay, Danielle, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Sorry, I thought of another question on OPEB.
Great.
Are those guaranteed benefits? Like, is there a chance that, I know a lot's changed in like the pension landscape and everything. And is there a chance that someday in the future governments would potentially reduce those benefits? Not Maynard specifically, but like how guaranteed is that? Because I know that with private employers, they've been, going to different plans, and they've been limiting new employees from being eligible and things like that. So I'm just wondering if the country gets to a point, or the state gets to a point where it's like, there's no way this can be funded. How guaranteed is that?
I don't think you can go backwards on people that are already in the system. They would be grandfathered and secured to get paid pretty much. But I think you're not wrong that in the future, it could start being less and less of a carrot basically for government employees.
Right,
might
I
be-
believe we could do plan design changes and change the
Yeah.
percentage of what the town is willing to fund for newer employees or even current employees. Towns go to 60-40 splits versus 75-25. They do plan design changes to mitigate costs. That is something that towns do look at to
Yeah.
reduce the liability in the future.
And Medicare contributions also contribute to that. And then but I mean, it's one of like, so we don't pay as well as like the private industry. So one of like the offsets to that imbalance is benefits. And so we try to work with unions in particular, because that's majority of the employees are unionized. But we try to make sure that we can sort of like compensate for the cost of living, especially, as the cost of living in Maynard goes up and maybe we're not keeping up with the market rate. So we try to like offset in other ways. It's one of the perks of working for government.
Yeah,
But,
to be totally
it's-
clear, I'm not suggesting that Maynard should consider doing that.
No,
I'm
we
just
do-
like, it seems like a scary number, so I'm trying to figure out like 30 years from now,
Yeah.
what do towns do if this number is like out of
But
control?
that's a good question, and it's been asked a lot, and a lot at the State House in particular. There's the local government advisory committee that advises the governor's office directly, and they are representative by municipal. Like, you'll hear about this as like you get like the Beacon, which is the MMA newspaper, whatever. Sometimes you'll see LGAC, and what they do is they say, hey, this is really scary to us, whatever it is, and usually it's unfunded mandates. In particular, OPEB is a big scary number because the great majority of municipalities are at or below where we are in our investments. So only a handful, and I mean like a handful of the 321 municipalities have begged, borrowed, and stealed and figured out how to pay for OPEB, and some at great cost. So some have done it, but majority of us are like, I don't know, like we don't have a good plan right now. We're paying for pensions. We're making sure people are covered right now. And then will the state save the day? I don't know. I have a degree in policy, and they told us a scary story about Social Security and how long that might last. So like I don't have that much faith in future government to say we'll be okay. I just know that right now, if I got the free cash, we put a little into the bank.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, so when Elliot had been asking questions, I won't speak for him, obviously, but it sounded like he was concerned that maybe we should be putting more in to fund it.
Yeah.
And I think that seems valid, but it also seems like, based on what you're saying, we're doing okay comparatively, not comparatively to the pool of liabilities that we're looking at,
Yeah.
but compared to like other towns and where they're at with that.
Right. No, right. Few towns that have the limited resources we do, and I mean like revenue, are able, amongst my friends, like none of us have like a solid plan to figure it out. But it's definitely something we think about, and we do think about plan design. Like we've been, Maynard in particular, we've been fortunate where we haven't had to do plan design. I'm talking about like what you get for insurance, like your insurance coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And then we haven't had to make significant change in that in the last 4 years since I've been here, because we have a relatively healthy workforce. We have a pretty solid relationship with our insurance provider, and so we start high in our estimations every year, and then our actual rate comes down. So our claims are sort of stabilized and whatnot, and we'll see how it's going to look post OPEB, post COVID, but like. That's what I'm saying. Like, there hasn't been a lot of fluctuation in that, and I haven't been sort of like, it's difficult for me to negotiate with the unions when they're like, hey, you're not paying as much as everybody else anyways.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Does the OPEB obligation count against us for things like bond rating? Or is
They
that
do look at
considered
that.
separate?
They do look at it.
No, they do look at it. One of the things they did say in their credit opinion was they looked to see that we're making an effort to put aside funds for OPEB,
Yeah.
and that our OPEB liability isn't growing by leaps and bounds that are
Okay.
uncontrollable, that we're
Okay.
putting money into stabilization funds, you know, so we have more liquidity and reserves on hand. So they look at certain things, and that's noted in the, that latest credit report, credit opinion from Moody's.
Okay.
That's right.
Can I just ask two things then?
Yep.
On the, so I had always heard there would be some idea we'd have some source of funding for this once we had fully funded the pensions. So that my understanding is we're contributing extra money to this pension system right now that then gets fully funded in 2036.
Mm.
I think we were saying, and that would be available then,
Yeah, that's right.
potentially for OPEB.
That's my
Do
expectation.
we know how much that is, that we're the kind of extra amount we're contributing each year?
I'm not sure what that number is.
Yeah, I couldn't say how much we put in. We put in 2 point something million this year. So like, that's a good question. But that's like my, if I was pressured to have a plan, my plan would be that, Peter, like at 2036, we're going to switch over from pension to OPEB.
From what I hear, that's a lot of towns' plan,
Yeah.
is once they're fully funded for the pensions, then they'll use that money towards funding OPEB.
Yep.
Okay.
And then just in terms of, you know, are these things really fixed forever? You know, I think they are fixed by state law, but I think, you know, there are certainly some retirees in Rhode Island, I don't know, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, they did some massive state law change and just cut everybody's pensions. So,
Oh.
you know, that might happen.
Wow. I
you
would
know,
have
if
thought
it
that
gets
was illegal,
Mm.
but I guess if
That
it's
or
the government, they don't worry about illegal all the
Yeah,
time.
I don't know. Retirees vote, so I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know how well that would work. I don't know.
All right. Any other questions for Lori and Greg at this time? Okay. Well, thank you all both for being here. Thank you for being at town meeting on Saturday and a late night on Monday. Sorry it was so back to back for you. I appreciate you being here. And you know, we will definitely be in touch.
No, thanks for your work at town meeting, y'all. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Was a pleasant, beautiful day. It was a lively discussion.
There
I didn't have to say
was.
very much, which I always love. And but
No,
y'all did
Greg
very
kept
good.
looking at me like, you want to talk
No,
about that?
Alana wanted to talk the whole time, and I
Oh,
kept
I had
saying,
to fight many times.
I think my comment was often like, just wait.
I know. Like, no, David's got it. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So, but good job, Alana, and good job, everyone. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
I wasn't there.
Thank
so
you.
I missed it.
I
Missed
know.
it was the best town
That's
meeting
good
ever.
stuff.
Good night.
You got so much done too, I'm sure.
All right. Thank you,
Thank-
Lori. And
All right.
Thanks for
All
being
right,
Thank
good
here.
night,
you.
Greg and Lori. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're
guys.
welcome. Good night.
okay. Moving on to routine agenda items. We need to look at some minutes. I will pull those up. I'm sorry they were a little.
That was
up
my
to the
fault. I'm
minute.
gonna do them next day. So tomorrow you will have a draft of tonight.
It's all right. Understand. So these are the minutes that were sent around, except for we went back and changed
Yeah.
the reserve fund balance to reflect the ones that we had passed in May. So that is the only difference between this
Yeah,
draft and the
so-
one that went to your email.
So the other thing I would say is our custom had been not only to have the reserve fund transfer on there, but to
Mhm.
carry forward what had been spent, what transfers had been, had been executed.
I think the first
Okay.
three line items show that, but should I list that under the bold part as well?
Yeah, I think that's what Ken is saying. Is
Okay,
the
gotcha.
transfers of 102,745, what were they? You know,
Okay,
it was
yeah,
this,
yeah.
this much
And
to
then
the
you
fire
just
department.
carry that forward throughout the year. So.
Okay, yeah,
Mhm.
that's easy.
Just a good quick point of reference for us.
Yeah.
Um, So were there any other changes or,
Were all the citizens that were guests concerned? Seems to me that there are one or two of them that weren't concerned.
Left out the same line item, multiple meetings. I don't think they're very concerned either. Few were very concerned.
the only other thing I would say is other attendees, maybe we should put, because Greg was there to talk about the reserve fund transfer. Was Lori as well?
Oh, that's right.
I don't know if that's-
Yeah, any town staff ought to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listed on there.
but
I mean,
now I
if
can't-
you know who the other, the other people are, you.
I think it was just Kevin, Marie. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll make a note of that this time.
Yeah, you did say which people spoke up, but I was
I'll
just
note that
thinking-
though in other attendees.
Yeah, if there's town staff there, it's usually good to list them as other
Okay.
attendees. So I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we accept the minutes of the May 9th Finance Committee meeting.
Do I have a second?
I will second that motion to approve the minutes.
All right. Any further discussion?
Can I just ask
Yeah.
a question?
Sure, go for it.
What is the customary way to handle it since I was absent? Do I abstain from voting?
No, you can
Sure.
still approve the minutes,
Okay.
even though you weren't there. However, if you feel like you don't have a good grasp on whether or not they should be approved, you can certainly abstain,
Okay, thank you.
but you are free to vote.
You don't get paid for this evening's meetings if you don't vote.
I don't get paid for any of this, Ken.
What? You don't get kickbacks yet? Shoot, we got to get her on the toll.
Recording, Alana, recording.
Sorry. Okay, voting, Katie,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Jillian,
I was absent, so I'm gonna abstain.
okay, Ken,
Yes,
Danielle,
I'll abstain as well.
all right, and I am a yes.
So
So
how
four
do I
yes,
do I mark
Oh.
that 4-0 or?
four
Four.
yeses, 0 object, 1 and 2 abstain.
Okay.
to abstain.
Okay.
Okay, and then we're gonna look very briefly at the town meeting itself. We don't do minutes for the town meeting where we had just a quorum notice out, but we had that separate quick meeting to discuss the change in Article 20 that we
Whole 3
voted
sentences.
to recommend. So here it is. There you go. Any changes or questions?
We just had dollar
So-
signs on the funds.
Oh, yeah. I
So,
can,
so technically, you know, Peter may feel differently, but typically we keep the meeting open during town meeting just in case something had to be voted on, and then
so we don't
Oh, I
adjourn,
had
is what you're
I
saying?
had posted the
quorum.
quorum notice for town meeting separately
Okay,
from this one. So I guess I sort of thought I should
no.
open and
that's
close
fine.
this one and then have the town meeting quorum.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. Is there a motion?
I will make a motion to approve town meeting minutes for July, or sorry, June 11th, 2022.
Actually, let's call this in that regard. I'm gonna call this was a separate from town meeting,
Right,
finance
right,
committee
okay,
meeting.
yeah,
Shortly before town meeting, just so that we're clear though, to Ken's
Yeah.
point as well, that that this was a separate event. So sorry, go ahead and make your motion now.
no, that makes sense. So I'll make a motion to approve the finance committee meeting minutes for June 11th.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, then roll call vote. Katie,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Jillian,
I will abstain once again since I was not
Okay.
present at that meeting.
Danielle,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Okay, excellent. Moving on, updates from chair and the members. For my updates, I just wanted to thank everyone who was able to come to town meeting. And that I thought it was, a really, it was an interesting one. There was a lot going on. I thought a lot of the discussion was very good. The Green Maynard Citizens Petition discussion was particularly in depth, I would say. Also, the discussion on the recording of meetings was very good. And, this has been a particularly challenging annual town meeting cycle, I would say, certainly from my perspective. So I appreciate everyone hanging in there with all the twists and turns, and thankful that we got it done, and that we're moving on from that. So other than that, I think that's pretty much it for me. Other members have anything to report?
Well, I'll just say, I
Was
guess
it-
I'll just thank everybody for going to town meeting and allowing me to miss town meeting. Had graduation the evening before, and then getting ready for our daughter's graduation party on Saturday evening was not good timing for us. So thank you. I was so sorely tempted to come over because I wanted to hear some of the discussion, but
Mhm.
it's just not possible.
Well, you were missed, but we totally understood, and congratulations to your daughter.
Yep, congratulations. I have a question. Is the results of the meeting, are they posted on the town website yet? Like what was voted yes and no's?
That's a good question, but I could tell you quickly, the Green Maynard Citizens Petition did pass. The other citizens petitions did not. Article 11 was actually withdrawn or passed over. We didn't vote on that one. Mr. Stone opted to pass that one over. And we also passed over the one having to do with trash. I forget what article number that is, but due to it being, found not to be a legal ask. And the rest of the articles passed. I remember that correctly, right, guys? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay.
It's not been posted. I had checked earlier and it's not on there yet.
Any
Okay, thanks.
other? Yeah, no problem. Any other things to report from committee members?
I'm
There is
so
a
used to
budget
2-hour
subcommittee
meetings.
meeting
It's
on Wed-
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jillian.
There's a budget subcommittee meeting on Wednesday. I forwarded you that agenda, but it was pretty recent to this meeting. So
Okay. Yep, I'll send that along in case anyone wants to go on.
I have a Green Meadow Building Committee next Tuesday. So our next meeting, I'll have updates from that.
Okay. All right, discussion of upcoming meeting schedule and a little bit of FY23 planning. So at our last meeting, we were going to discuss whether we needed a June 27th meeting or if we could go to July 11th for our next meeting. Natasha, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask and this would be for Katie, maybe, and I know the FinCom has brought up about the Green Meadow, talking about the Green Meadow building, and they recently voted on what plan to recommend. And I know when they presented at the school committee, it looked like the plans were with the assumption that Green Meadow would be taken down. The original site would be taken down, the building. And I just remember, Ken, you may have in years, when the whole roof conversation was happening, that we had talked about maybe retaining that building for other uses and why we would maintaining it. So I just wanted to kind of throw it out there that that was something I thought was an interesting point for the conversation, just for the Green Meadow, that the plans are with the assumption that Green Meadow will be demolished as part of the project.
And I believe I believe that I have those plans, so I'll forward them to the full committee.
Yeah, I
so
think
you
it's
can
number
take a look at them.
7. They ended up, I was like an
Right.
amended version of number 7.
I have
Okay.
those two that if you don't, Alana, I can send those to her. I missed the last 2 meetings because I wasn't properly on their email chain because I know Alana,
Oh,
we
no.
worked that out with them. And so
I know, I
would
was
get
gonna
it.
say, wait, again?
I know, and I'd get it like 20 minutes before and I'd be not at home. And so I did miss the last 2, but I have the next like 3 on my calendar. And
Oh, good.
so I hope to catch up. But I do have access to those documents if you don't have them. So
Okay.
let you
Thank
know.
Yeah, I gotta say, I've been disappointed to see the planning process. You know, there's an opportunity there to integrate the 2 schools, and I realized that, you know, there was this whole discussion about they need to be separate schools, blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't have a kid in the schools, so I don't have a dog in this fight. And, you know, but frankly,
Well, you do as a taxpayer.
no, I
absolutely
get
do.
that. I get that. But I'm just saying, if I were a Green Meadow parent and they weren't doing any better job of integrating the schools than what is happening, I'd be very sorely disappointed. You know, for years, and of course, I haven't looked at it more recently, but for years, one of the big challenges was transitioning from the Green Meadow building over to 4th grade and Fowler. And I was hoping that at a minimum, we would get the buildings closer together, not separated by a driveway, and see them integrated as a single campus.
Mhm.
I know that some of the plans talked about taking down the old Green Meadow School. Again, this is one of those things that to me is very, short-sighted when we sit here and, do that, but.
Well, that's what when I talked about it, it remembered because part of the whole investment in the roof was that building potentially could be something else. I mean, like, I think senior center, like there are certain needs in the future, like even part of it could have been used. So that's where I don't think there was a lot of public awareness that building is intended to come down as
So,
part of the
so
plan.
why isn't the committee advocating for these interests? Why is it that, it has to be vigilant community members who sit there and bring this up? When you sit here and do a project, we should be sitting here saying, okay, what do we want this project to accomplish? And somewhere along the way, we have been discussing using that building as a senior center for, I don't know how, well, and other purposes. And why is it that the committee is not looking at that saying, hey, look, one of the things that we want to have come out of this is, having this building maintained.
I think
Or a
when it goes
portion of
to,
it.
I was just thinking like when it goes to town vote next year, that might be a better sell. If we're planning for using that for that senior population, because they've been.
This avoids the question of why it is that the committee is not looking at, at integrating the two campuses. Integrating the 2 campuses has long been discussed, and maintaining the building has long been discussed. And when I went to listen to it, that was not discussed at all as being, an objective that we were working towards. And so, as to Alana's point, as a taxpayer, but as a member of this, finance committee who at some point is, we're going to have seniors coming in. Where's my senior center? And we're just missing the opportunity here.
I think some of it had to do with how the proposal was written to the MSBA that put some constraints over what the MSBA would then be willing to do. This was a point that I was also frustrated with, because once I started in a little bit and then Katie took over for me, but I too was like, wait, what happened to the idea of the like having just 2 schools maybe, or moving the school closer? And they said that wasn't part of how it was written to the MSBA. The MSBA is looking at 3 separate schools. They're not looking at putting 2 schools together. And we're moving forward with the MSBA so we don't lose out on that money.
Okay.
Sorry.
So why is it that they are driving and we seem to be in some fear of, so if you have to have the building separate, have the building separate, but don't put a driveway in between the 2 of them. Okay, join them together. So sit there and say, okay, the MSBA proposal said we were going to do X. We're going to have 2 separate schools. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we make it so those schools are together? Okay, because some of those proposals do not at all try to achieve that.
Right.
And to the point that has been made, the whole idea of maintaining some portion of the old Green Meadow School, I did not hear that. I heard neither one of those things mentioned as being priorities or objectives for the project. And so I just, I was, frankly, frustrated and disgusted by the fact that,
Yeah.
that's not been put in this, despite the fact this has been a topic of conversation, I don't know how many times.
I think sometimes too, when you're working with the firms and the architects that do this on a regular basis, the whole idea of like, well, you build the school just like we did for the high school. You build your new school right behind, and then you bulldoze that one, and then you've got a whole new campus, basically, is kind of the way that they are used to doing it. And if you don't, to your point, really say, no, that's not what we want. We want this, price out this. Or they come back to you and say, well, you could do that, but that's so much more expensive. And then you've got MSBA saying, we have a budget, like certain financial restrictions are put on you.
I don't know that. Okay, so first off, if this were a financial restriction, if something came in and said it's impossible to do that, that would be one thing. But I'm not hearing either of those objectives being articulated as being our goals in the process. And oh, by the way, we sat there and said we were going to put 8th grade over into over in the high school, because having 8th grade in the high school would help with the transition, would make kids more likely to stay in Maynard. And then we moved 8th grade out of the school system, I'm sure for very good reasons, mainly having to do with population. I would also point out the fact, and I'll shut up, I'll also point out the fact that we are now sitting here talking about redoing the front lawn here, when very specifically up front, this was brought up about, hey, shouldn't we make this into a playing field? No, we don't have the money to do that. We wouldn't do that. And so they just sat there and grazed it over, okay? When for a small amount, then we would have been able to make a smaller amount. It wasn't a small amount. A
Right.
smaller amount, then we would have been able to make additional ball fields. But we were sit there told, no, we never use it that way. Don't, it's enough to just,
I think I agree. And these things can be frustrating and challenging when put into committees, and then the committees function in certain ways and not in others. And then
but why is it that we don't go into this? And so, I'm talking about The Board of Selectmen is represented on this committee, correct?
Yes.
And
Yes,
the
I think
town
it's just the-
administrator or has somebody
Yep.
on there, okay? Well, there are people who have been party to these discussions. Why isn't this, why isn't this on that list of here's what we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, and I think sometimes what can happen too is when you're in a room with the experts and with the people that are holding some of the purse strings, and they're sort of leading the witness a little, and then suddenly you lose sight of some of the things, and then you've gone down, and then it's a slow moving train that you can't stop.
So
I think
we
there's a bit
have
of
a
that.
responsibility to the taxpayer to do better than that. Just my opinion. think
And
we
I
have
did
a-
bring it up at the school committee meeting. That was kind of what I was kind of leading into, and they presented because it didn't seem like it was a theme in their presentation to us. I think it was the 26th, maybe, I can't remember now. So if you want to go back and listen to that portion of the meeting for the school committee, might be helpful. They did say they would take the feedback in, but my feedback to you, Katie, is if you're as a member of FinCom representing, because I know it was a FinCom heavily a point of conversation before you were on, might
Yeah.
be worth kind of like
Yeah.
bringing up or bubbling up a little bit more about the possibility of retaining Green Meadow and what that scenario might.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not final, right? Is what you're saying, that vote was made, but it's not something that's set in stone at this
Well, it
point.
hasn't been funded and they haven't started digging.
Right,
So
right.
Right, the
Okay.
vote is for, well, that's what I'm thinking. The vote is next year for the town, and wouldn't it be nice if it was portrayed in some way that we're
Yeah.
just, we're considering a population who is gonna be expected to vote on it, their needs possibly. And I
Right.
think it might be more of a successful vote as well.
Well,
Yeah,
so
I'd be
the-
happy
the-
to bring that up.
The fact that we haven't voted on it and the fact we haven't funded it means nothing. Because we thought, okay, we're going to be able to sit here and talk about this, only to find out at the very beginning that we can't even consider having the two schools combined because of the way the freaking letter was written.
I know.
Okay, so there are
Right.
things that happen early in the process that
Yeah.
end up dictating and constraining the project going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that's good feedback, Natasha. I will bring that up on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Okay, so getting back to discussing our meeting schedule and a little bit of FY23 planning. We do have, as I said, there are some reserve fund transfer, at least one, possibly multiple, coming from the schools. They are getting the paperwork done. It hasn't gone to select board yet, but I believe it will be at their next meeting, which is Tuesday, the 21st. Natasha, do you think they'll be at that meeting for the
I think
select board?
so, and
Okay.
Wayne and I, we have a school subcommittee meeting as well this week, so I think we're
Okay.
gonna be able to, finalize the a revamp of what was originally sent to you into those
Okay.
3 forms to get it in everyone's awareness.
Okay. So in terms of us meeting, we could meet on June. Oh, and just for a point of clarification, Lori confirmed with DOR that reserve fund transfers can be done until July 15th, like budget transfers. Because my question was, do we have to meet on the 27th for these so that they are done before June 30th for the books? And the answer is we have until July 15th, like we do for budget transfers. Lori will have budget transfers for us. Those are also for our new committee members, just so you know. Budget transfers are not a specific amount of money that we have control over, like the reserve fund. They are transfers between departments, but only within those 9 categories that we set out at town meeting. So you can't transfer between police and general government, but you can transfer between departments within general government. This happens every year. It's a normal thing. It's just to balance the books. This department had a little extra, this department's a little under, we bring it back into balance, okay? We have until July 15th for those. They give you like 2 weeks after the close of the fiscal year. So Lori is going to have those ready for our July 11th meeting.
Sorry, Alana. I thought we could transfer between the line items. It doesn't need to be resolved here, and if we don't know, we should just ask, but.
Okay,
I thought
I'll ask, but
the Budget Transfer Authority was to change any town meeting budget line by up to 10%. And you can do it within the last month of the fiscal year, I'm pretty sure.
okay, I thought they had to stay within the items that we appropriate at town meeting. But within those, they can go wherever they want within departments. But I may be wrong. I will ask.
I don't
Within
think so,
the-
but yeah,
with-
I don't.
I believe that Peter's right. Within the budgets, they can move things
That's
around
what
within.
town meeting approved, yeah.
Town meeting approves the 8 items and how they shift things around within those. This is to allow them to transfer from one account to another of those major accounts.
Okay, I'll ask Lori because
As Peter said,
Okay.
you don't have to, this
Yep.
doesn't have to be resolved tonight, but
no, but we should certainly for everybody's
believe-
benefit. We
my
should know.
understanding is what Peter's is.
Okay. So regardless of that answer, but these happen at the end of the year. The select board votes to approve them and we vote to approve them. Unlike the reserve fund transfer, the select board simply passes those on to us. They do not need to vote to approve those. We are the body for reserve fund transfer. These go through both. And so that's going to happen on July 11th. So July 11th, our meeting will be the first of the fiscal year, which means we will elect officers and the town moderator will come to that meeting to do that process. We will have budget transfers with Lori. And then we could have these reserve fund transfers for the schools, or if we would like to hold our normal second meeting of June on the 27th, we could do the reserve fund transfers for the schools then. So I'm looking for a little bit of your thoughts on scheduling.
Yeah, so first off, you'll want to reach out to Dick if you haven't already and just remind him about the meeting of the 11th because he actually opens the meeting and so forth. And he, technically speaking, will also post the meeting. And since we'll be probably doing it via Zoom, then you'll probably need to provide him with the Zoom link and stuff. That's what happened. So, I guess the way I would, just throw this out from, the rest of the committee is if we do want to start taking a look at long-term trends, typically there, is a fall town meeting, which means we have relatively few meetings to get back into the sort of 5-year budget planning. So given the fact that we have new members, given the fact that we haven't done this since pre-COVID, even if we have short meetings, I would throw it out that if we as a body want to get back into this, we have a limited number of meetings before we have to turn attention to fall town meeting. And then right after that, we get into
budget.
the right, exactly. So, having said all that, if there's no other business, then, and the committee doesn't want to take that up until, later in the summer or even the fall, then, it sounds like there's no reason to be meeting on the 27th.
Okay. Any other thoughts? 27th?
Alana?
Yep.
The only thing regardless of what you guys are planning, I just want to make sure that Wayne and Brian would be available also for the reserve fund transfers for the, if you're thinking about doing July. Because I
Mhm.
know from a school perspective, they might have some vacation planned if that's the date that you're thinking. But I
Yeah,
don't, I don't,
we'll certainly, let them know, and as
Okay.
long as one or some representative for
right.
questioning is there, I think that's fine. But yeah, I'll let them know as soon as possible. I wanted to discuss it here with the committee first, make a decision, and then let them know.
So this is June 27th you're discussing, correct?
June 27th would historically be our next
Right.
meeting. Yes, the fourth Monday. And then after that would be July 11th, the first of the next fiscal year.
Got it.
I guess, how about this? Should we see who is opposed to meeting on June 27th?
I'm open to it, but I will be on vacation.
Oh,
I
okay.
happily
Then
zoom in if needed.
No, don't. Last year I had to zoom in and sometimes it was terrible. It was a disaster, but we had to get, my vacation was late in the summer and it was special town meeting time and it
Oh,
was a
yeah.
crunch and it was a little crazy. So no, go on vacation. Don't worry about it. So other members, are anyone else not available the 27th or not interested?
I'm available. Yeah, I don't know. To Ken's point, I'm just not seeing that there'd be a whole lot of energy at that point to launch into the multi-year planning. So, I mean, I don't feel the burning desire to meet the 27th.
Yeah, unless we're gonna do some homework ahead of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there is some initial discussion that there's some initial discussion that might be worthwhile, even if there's no homework done ahead of time. But I guess at best we would characterize that as sort of educational in nature. And
Mhm.
if Katie's out and we don't know about Elliot, then it may not be worth it. So
To that end,
The-
oh, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
No, I was gonna, no, just, I'm sure it's on your list and we can take it up with, in July, but I would like to go back and talk about free cash again.
Actually, yes, that was
particularly
another
the
topic.
sources of the free cash thing, which I think the first thing would be, to go back to Lori on that.
Mhm.
That we need more information about where that number comes from. I don't,
Well, talk to me about that, because I thought she had sent,
I'm sorry, maybe I have missed it, but I think
well,
she
I
sent
want to make sure that
like
I
a-
sent it along, actually. She may have sent it and I didn't forward it, which is also a possibility. So now that I'm looking at it right now, let me go ahead and send what she sent, because I think it was right in the middle of ATM prep and it was possibly overlooked. So this could be what you are looking for. And then that can be a jumping off point from that discussion, for that discussion. There we go. But good reminder, because yes, that was something
but
that
yeah,
was going
just as long as we know about topics for stuff before we get into fall town meeting.
Yep.
That still doesn't mean we need to meet the 27th. Can I ask a slightly different, but as a concerned FinCom member,
Sure.
and clearly we're not voting yet and whatever, but I would be curious if the current officers of the Finance Committee are willing to continue in their capacity in the future year.
This was going to be a
or do we
topic I
need to-
wanted to bring up before the 11th, just so we're not all like deer in headlights. Although, just to be
Exactly.
clear, we're not supposed to have the outcome full, it should be a proper vote that night. This is important to the town moderator, I know. But it is good, I think, to just have some understanding. So I know, for your knowledge, that Elliot will not be renewing his appointment. So we will be down a member. Peter, you are also up for your.
Yes, and I did talk
Okay.
to Dick, and I expressed my desire to be reappointed.
Wonderful.
From the
Yay.
indications I have from him, I believe he will reappoint me, but
Okay.
I don't mean to be so.
I was re-sworn in actually right prior to town meeting with Becky. So I have been reappointed for an additional 3 years.
So is it 1 year appointments, 2 year? What determines the appointment? 3.
3.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
all 3, but they're offset. So 3 of us are on one schedule and then 2 of us and 2 of us, so that it's not like you're overturning more than 3.
Gotcha.
ever.
So
There.
Elliot was completing
Yeah.
someone
3-year
else's
term.
Okay.
Oh, was he on someone else? I can't remember. There was quite
Yeah,
a bit of
the only
turnover.
exception would be as if you're filling the last year of someone's term.
Yes.
I see.
So if someone
Okay.
resigns midterm, you then pick up their specific term, and whenever
Okay.
their term was to end, you would then re-up. So that could be 1 year, 2 year,
Gotcha.
depending on when they resigned.
So I'm sorry, so just to be clear, all terms are 3 years, but they're staggered in
Yeah.
order to do that. But if you're filling out somebody else's term, whenever it is that you're appointed, you only go to the end of their term and then you're eligible for
Okay.
reappointment.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
So he's the only one whose term is ending and will not be renewing at this point.
Correct.
Okay.
So get the word out
Yeah.
if you
Open
know
seat.
anyone that may
Uh.
want, and I will as well, and hopefully we will not be down a member for very long. To answer Peter's question, so Katie, how are you feeling about your role as secretary, and are you
I'm good.
willing-
It's fine. I just need to do my minutes sooner, but it's fine. I'm good doing it. It's not a giant hassle when I
That
sit
is-
down and do them.
that is music to everyone's ears, I'm sure. So I would be willing to continue on as chair should there not be objection, but I am also willing to step down if someone else would like to step forward.
Not
How
ready
about-
for that leap
I
yet.
would certainly nominate you.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Jillian, would you be willing to be nominated again for vice chair, or?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's not too many roles here. I think you're doing a very great job of being chair. There's not too much for the vice chair to do. So if that's, I'm also happy to step down, but if that's something people want me to continue in, that's fine too.
So are you saying you'd like me to give you more work?
I'm going to be upfront and honest. I have like a 7-month-old puppy that's like chewing on my
Aw.
arms right now as we're talking. So
Okay,
I don't have a lot of free time.
that's fine.
So, yeah.
Okay. Nope, that's fair. We're happy to have you on. And also, I think this was sent around, but just as a point for my reference. So July 15th, I believe, is when the current Zoom allowance is up. There is legislation in right now that is going to look to continue it until December of 23, I believe. But it, as far as I know, has not yet been passed. Hopefully it will before the July 15th deadline. Is it in general, assuming allowed by law, our will to continue with Zoom meetings versus going back to in person at some point this summer or fall?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I think there's a balance there. it's, it's clear to me that the meeting dynamics are different when in person versus when it's on Zoom. Having said that, I think many people think that it's easier. Many, members of the community feel as though it's easier to attend when it's Zoom. And I think most of us feel as though it's,
Mhm.
easier to attend via Zoom. So.
Question on that, and Ken or Alana, I don't know if you might know, but so I'm a part of a BNI group, and we went all Zoom during the pandemic, and now we've adapted a hybrid kind of where one
Yep.
meeting a month we will be in person. We meet once a week, and the other weeks we do Zoom. Is there, a hybrid option to maybe where we meet, occasionally, but not every meeting?
Well, we could likely do even better than that because we're kind of a big deal.
Oh,
We meet in the select board room normally.
okay. I was going to ask where you guys even met.
We
Okay.
do. We get the good room.
Okay.
And with that good room, currently the option for an actual hybrid, meaning we can have people in the room and people on
Zoom
Zoom
in. Okay.
at any meeting, as opposed to a meeting in person, a meeting on Zoom kind of
Yeah,
hybrid.
yeah.
I believe that is an option for us. I will confirm with Greg. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
There are times where it's a little hard to see the people on Zoom or vice versa. But I have Zoomed in for select board meetings that are in that hybrid model, and it wasn't so bad. So that is
I zoomed in
likely,
a select board one too, and it was
yeah,
more impressive than I thought it was going to be.
right. So that is likely an option for us. I don't know if that involves like the WAVM
Yeah.
student volunteers, which we don't normally draw on for
Right.
help. So let me confirm with Greg and let you all know.
I think, it might be, an interesting thing to send out a survey to the members to, and I'm speaking to you, Alana, send out individual, to allow people to consider it, think about it, because I think there are some of us who are reluctant to meet in person. I
Yeah.
was not advocating meeting in person. What I was trying to say is meetings are very different when they're in person versus
That is certainly true.
versus when they're on Zoom. Now, having said that, again, I think, members of the public, generally speaking, those of us who know how few attended, prior to COVID, we certainly know that more members of the public attend now.
Yeah. And that is certainly true. And if there are members who would like to speak about this, not on recording, with their thoughts, I'm happy to take that in as well. You don't have to say publicly. But Jillian, if you want, no, okay. Okay, so that's good information. And I will ask Greg about the room and just get our just so we know all of our options before making any sort of change. So
Yeah, if I could
Yep.
jump in,
sure.
I'm sort of on the other end of the spectrum, so I'm trying to minimize my exposure to public places for people in my family who have pre-existing conditions. So if we do go back to something where the remote option is not available, I'm probably going to be leaving the committee.
Okay. No, that's very good information to know. So we hope that we don't have to come to that. So the hybrid option where some of us are in the room, but you can still Zoom, provided that works out okay, would be acceptable in your mind?
Oh yeah,
or
that's totally fine for me.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. So it's down to making a decision about the 27th. Here is what I'm thinking.
Now, if I'm not there, who takes minutes?
We're gonna have to make somebody else do it.
Oh, sorry guys. Maybe you shouldn't meet the 27th.
I know. I was gonna say that's a big that's a big negative on the 27th.
Yeah.
Okay. here is what I am thinking. I am thinking that we do not need a meeting on the 27th. However, I will send a message to the school department representatives, Brian and Wayne, who would likely want to be at our meeting for their reserve fund transfers. If July 11th poses a significant, issue to them for that purpose, and we can meet to do that for them on the 27th instead, then we will meet on the 27th. All right, so I will send a message to them. I will let you all know and confirm whether we need a meeting on the 27th. Does that sound reasonable?
Mhm.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I believe that is it for our agenda, ladies and gentlemen. I will entertain a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay, and I'll do a roll call vote. Katie,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Peter,
yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well, and I have that at 8:58, Madam Secretary.
I
Thank
got
you
it
so much,
down.
everybody. I will be in touch.
Hey, everybody.
All right. Have a
Good
good
night.
Good
night.
night.
Good
Bye.
night.